Welcome to class number 1 for Exploring Divine Resonance. It's such an honor to be with you. I'm opening to an experience unlike anything I've ever engaged in before, and I'm honored to have you joining me in this experiment. The experiment's unfolding on many different levels. We have people who are participating in the Zoom call here in the room, so to speak. Welcome to all of you. We have people who are participating in the simulcast on YouTube and people who are listening or watching the replay, either through those areas or through those avenues, as well as through a podcast. So for me, my experience is all now. So in whatever way you're participating, whenever you're joining in, for me, it's all happening now. That is to say, I'm experiencing the circle all unfolding now. And if this is your first time sitting with me, maybe it would be appropriate to introduce myself briefly to you. My name is Ken Stone, and I like to think of myself as a spiritual messenger. For me, a messenger is someone who is consciously aware of their relationship with the divine and perhaps even how the divine expresses through them. So that's true for a messenger. And then the key from my perspective is that awareness now plays out in interactions with others, or that awareness is part of interactions with others. And so one of the ways that the divine expresses through me is as a spiritual teacher, though I don't come from a particular spiritual tradition, and I haven't studied a tradition either. So you might wonder, well, what is it that you're teaching, Ken? Good question. We'll explore that maybe today, maybe throughout this series in different ways, though that's not my conscious focus. I'm not here to try to teach anything per se, but really more just open up to the divine expression through me in the group, to be present with what is unfolding here and explore divine resonance in lots of different ways and just be with it as it unfolds, which could be very intriguing. Certainly it is to me. I'm glad you're here. I'm excited that there are others who find this an intriguing proposition as well. And I'm excited to see how it all unfolds. Some other ways that God expresses through me are as an author. I write. And I guess another way would be to call me a healer, although that label doesn't really resonate with me because the idea of healing, as I understand it, is that we're out to fix something that's wrong. And from my perspective, there's nothing really wrong with us. We're having a developmental experience, let's say, and we can talk more about that if that's of interest. So there are a couple of things that I want to make sure I touch on before we go even a step further into our experience together. And I'll probably reiterate these each week in a more abbreviated way, on the presumption that for somebody who joins us after we've headed off on our expedition, comes back to the first session to listen to this longer iteration, but I'll keep it short here as well. I think the first thing to say, and this is really important, please don't operate a motor vehicle or heavy equipment of any sort. And the reason for this is really simple, but it might sound kind of weird if this is the first time you've ever shared space with me. From my perspective, we're sitting together, even though that might not be obvious to you at this point. For example, if you just hear my voice in your head, you might think, well, Ken, you're not sitting next to me. But from my standpoint, we're sitting together. And maybe we see each other visually, or maybe you just see me, but still, we're sitting together. And one of the things that happens in that space, in my language, would be that the divine in you is enlivened by the divine in me. And one of the things that I think I know about that is that I have no idea what's actually going to happen. And perhaps of equal interest to you, I hope, is that you don't know what's going to happen either. But I can tell you that a great many other people who have sat with me over the years have had an experience of falling asleep when we're sitting together. And you might think, well, why is that? And I guess we could say one reason is that the things that I'm saying maybe aren't that interesting, and maybe that's true. But probably at a deeper level, there's something else going on energetically or spiritually. And that something else, I would like to say, has something to do with your conscious mind not being able to stay consciously aware of what is unfolding on an experiential level. And when that happens, there might not be a whole lot of warning. So if you're driving right now, pull off to the side of the road. And please take what I'm saying seriously, because I've worked with people in some cases for years in private session, and they've never dropped out. And then all of a sudden one day it happens, and there's really no warning. It's not a problem. There's nothing bad going on. If it doesn't happen, you're not missing out. It's nothing like that. It's just that it could happen. And I really want you to be safe. And I'd like you to be safe with others as well, because of course, if you're driving or operating heavy equipment, that could impact other people. But there's another reason to not do anything else, and that is to open up to the gift of an experience of your own presence. Another way we could say this is to say an experience of divine presence. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to please stay well hydrated. And again, this may be sort of obvious, but and it may be confusing too. Well, why do you have to remind us to be hydrated, Ken? Well, part of the reason is that what we're doing together, I think, probably requires a little extra water, or in whatever way you choose to hydrate. That's certainly true for me. I have a couple of 32-ounce bottles here, which I may well consume before we're done. But it's not so much about me trying to project anything on you. It's just to invite you to be aware of what your body is asking for. So if you feel thirsty and you don't normally feel thirsty, don't dismiss that as a meaningful sign, I guess is the point. Let me say, it's really important to stay in your own energy. And we can talk more about this in the Q&A section. But if there are other people you'd like to share this experience with, it's very easy to share it with them. You can invite them to register at exploringdivineresonance.com, and they can join you in the Zoom call, or you can share the podcast or the YouTube link or whatever. But if there's someone you want to be part of it, invite them to participate rather than trying to include them or direct energy their direction. And in the same way, in the context of the circle, especially when we open up to interacting with one another, if there are questions that are coming up, someone's asking me something or reflecting on a challenge that's going on in their life, it can be very tempting to think, oh, I'll send some love their direction, or I'll send some energy. But that's actually a very, very disruptive dynamic. And I'm happy to go into more of why that's true. But for now, I'll just say, be with yourself through the entire experience. For the deepest possible experience here, I really want to invite you to drop all intention. Just set it all aside. I'll explain more of why, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in many different ways as we go forward together. But for now, just consider this possibility, even if it isn't reality for you. An intention or a mantra or something that you're hoping or wishing for, at some level, is a stop sign for raw divine expression as you. Now, this may not be a resonant idea for you. This may sound like a bunch of dissonance, and it may be quite agitating to you. And maybe it's a bridge too far to ask you to trust me, especially after I've shared this idea with you. But I want to suggest to you, for all the work that I've been doing, for all the years I've been doing this, I've never once had somebody say to me, when I held an intention, I went deeper. I've had many people say, I had profound experiences when I held an intention. They were different than I ever had before. But then when I invite them to drop their intentions, every single person has reflected eventually something much bigger than what they were aware of prior begins to open up in their body, in their being, in their awareness. And I want to invite you to open to that experience as well. If you're viewing this through the YouTube simulcast or through the podcast, if you're listening through the podcast and you'd like to participate in the circle directly, the way to do that is to go to exploringdivineresonance.com. Okay, let's get on with it, shall we? Setting everything else aside, with your eyes closed, breathing in and out through the nostrils, palms to the sky, if all of that is comfortable for you. As always, please don't operate a motor vehicle or heavy equipment of any sort during this or any time we're together. Making your way energetically into the circle to that place that resonates most for you. Deep breath in, hold, and as you begin releasing this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before in this day, all the way out to the count of 8. And as you release this breath, if you want something to focus on letting go of the thoughts that have been dominant in your awareness of late, whatever those thoughts may be. Another deep breath in, hold, and as you begin releasing this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before since the first of the year, all the way out to the count of 8. And with this, if you'd like something to focus on, letting go of your thoughts and emotions that have been dominant of late. Another deep breath in and hold. And as you begin releasing this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before since you were born, all the way out to the count of 8. Thoughts, feelings, and now the dominant way of being, releasing that as well. And another deep breath in. Hold. And as you begin releasing this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before since the inception of your soul, releasing the entirety of your being into the unknown divine mystery, all the way out to the count of 8. With your eyes still closed, just become aware of that cue of breath in front of your face. It serves you without any condition or criteria. You breathe in, a unit of breath serves you fully. No questions, none. A color begins to infuse itself through the cue. If you're assigning one with your imagination, perhaps pick one not normally present in the body except your eyes. And as it spreads throughout the entire cue, begin to be with the cue of breath from the perspective of the color. And as you begin to take your next breath, follow that breath in from the perspective of the color, in through the nostrils, up towards the crown, and down into the lungs. Staying in the lungs, as you continue to breathe, you may even begin to move time forward just a little bit faster, very gently and smoothly, so that you can witness the movement of your breath by following this color to the lining of your lungs and then into the bloodstream and eventually into every cell in your body. The breath is becoming you, and you are becoming the breath. allowing yourself to shift perspective from the lungs to beyond the body, eventually far enough away even from the planet so that you can perceive the entire planet in the screen of your awareness. And notice the breath of the planet surrounding our beautiful Earth. The cue of breath from which you breathe draws its breath from the breath of the planet. And so it is for your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor, and so on. With each breath, you are directly connected to those people closest to you physically in this moment. But it's not just those people, right? The breath of the planet serves everyone in your community, in your region, and even all the way out in your hemisphere, however you perceive it, northern or southern, eastern or western. With each breath, you are connected to each and every person, not just in your hemisphere, but on the planet. And the breath of the planet doesn't just serve people, it serves everything. The animals, the insects, the trees, the water, the fish, the plants, the rock, the dirt. With each breath, you are connected to everyone and everything above, upon, and within the planet itself. Indeed, you may begin having an experience of breathing by and for and of the planet. Some perhaps even of breathing in this way through every pore in your skin, as if your body glows when you draw in the breath. At some point, the breath of the planet becomes the breath of the cosmos, for at the very edge of our atmosphere, that breath touches space and in turn, every other part of creation. And so we can say with each breath, you are connected to everyone and everything throughout all of creation, including that energy that underwrites and expresses as everyone and everything, the divine, a light originating perhaps on the other side of the cosmos. Yet with each breath that you draw in, it comes closer and closer until eventually you can perceive those twin frequencies that together comprise the divine light, the frequency of the divine itself and the frequency of perfect health, intertwined such that there is no separating one from the other. Perfect health, not just as we perceive or understand it as human beings in all of its contexts, but in every context, known and unknown, within the context of human beings or how we understand or perceive things on this planet, and also beyond, throughout all of creation. That light, be it a waveform or a particle, drawing closer and closer with each breath until eventually it connects in, perhaps initially at your nostrils and then instantaneously throughout your entire body. an invitation extended to each of the smallest aspects of you, known and unknown. Come, return to your natural state of resonance and alignment. And with that, the artifacts of dissonance appear to fall away and gather at the universal drain. The divine is becoming you, and you are becoming the divine. For whatever remains in separation, I invite you to remove the universal plug. I'll do the same. And with your permission, let's begin. I believe that the divine is equally present in every single human being, no matter who it is that we might be talking about, no matter what you or I might have done to other people, no matter what has been done to us. From my perspective, there is nothing that can attenuate or sever that most innate expressions or relationships. It's why I refer to the divine within. And one of the things that I think happens for all of us, though probably in very different ways, is that there is some outward expression of that inner relationship that we can develop. That is to say, we can not just experience the divine as a concept, but we can have a practical, visceral experience of it. And one of the ways that I perceive that encounter is with my hands and my feet. They buzz, they tingle. And one of the things that's happening as we're getting started here in this first session of exploring divine resonance is that my hands and feet are buzzing more and more. And in a sense, that's all that matters. Certainly from my perspective, it's all that matters. The words might be interesting or not interesting, but they're all an attempt, however effective or ineffective they might be, to bridge the gap between the thinking and understanding dominated perspective that we tend to have as human beings and this raw, visceral encounter with the divine by whatever name that is available within all of us. The mystical. And our theme today is resonance. I shared a study guide with those who had registered prior to yesterday, prior to the day before our first session. And for those who have registered, you can also find those in your replay link for today's sessions. And I think I shared earlier a way for those that aren't yet registered to register and receive the same. But I don't even want to necessarily revisit the questions here in our exploration and transmission. I just want to acknowledge that you may have been thinking about or reflecting about or exploring what resonance means to you. And that is a beautiful exploration. It is a rich journey. But right now, I actually want to shift from an exploration of ideas to primarily an experiential exploration, which might be kind of interesting. One of the things that happens when we get together in a circle like this, where we're just starting out together, is that we're all coming from very different perspectives. And this can make it challenging to communicate about with words. But even if we set aside words, if you're not used to exploring without words, for some people at least, it can be a little uncomfortable. Perhaps having words is more comforting, or at least there's something for the mind to pay attention to. But what happens if we drop words entirely? There are a few thoughts that you might refer to or remind yourself of if it's helpful. One might be just the long form awareness that comes from divine connecting breath. With each breath, you are connected to everyone, everything throughout the entire cosmos, the divine, the light, the twin frequencies intertwined, eventually connecting at the nostrils, perhaps initially, and then instantaneously throughout every aspect of your being, the artifacts of dissonance appearing to fall away and depart through the universal drain. The divine is becoming you, and you are becoming the divine. Or the shorthand. The river is flowing. Now, how is the river flowing a shorthand for all of those other words? Consider this. You're always breathing. There's always a cue of breath. It is always drawing its next breath to join the back of the cue from the breath of the planet. And the breath of the planet is always supporting everyone and everything on the planet. In the same way, if you went to a river or a stream near your location, wherever you are in the world, that river, as long as there's water in it, is always flowing. But just like the breath, perhaps you're not thinking about it or consciously aware of it unless or until perhaps you're sitting in this circle here. And in the same way, you might not be aware of the river flowing, except if you put yourself on the banks of the river and became aware of the river by listening to it or viewing it, or in other ways becoming aware of its presence. And just as you might, in the course of divine connecting breath, wish to direct the divine in some way, those artifacts of dissonance falling away, you might want to put a footnote on that, including this thing in my body, this thought in my mind, this part of my life. Let that fall away and be replaced by this other idea, thought, expression, or just the pure expression of the divine as that cell, idea, part of life, etc. So too, you may want to hold an intention that the river flow downhill as you sit next to it. Yet, if you drop the intention, the river still flows. So too, the divine is becoming you, and you are becoming the divine. Indeed, if you turn your back on the river and walk away, forget of its existence, still the river flows, just as with each breath you are connected. And the divine is becoming you, and you are becoming the divine. And just like it may hold an extra measure of presence or resonance for you to sit by the river, so too it may hold an extra measure of presence or resonance to sit in the circle and be reminded that the river is flowing and the divine is becoming you and you are becoming the divine. But it is not by my words or my idea, nor of yours, but simply a fact, a basic artifact, we could say, of what is moving. And if we come to a more intimate encounter with what is moving, divine presence, perhaps you've had the perspective before. This isn't a fixed radio channel, but something that is dancing up and down the dial, so to speak. Divine presence is not something to be locked down and secured, but something you get to move with. And so then, what of resonance? Reminding yourself, if it's helpful, the river is flowing, or with each breath, and so on, and letting go when no longer helpful, to drop further into the direct encounter with the mystery. And whatever follows. I'm going to drop language for now. If you come to a place of completion before I complete verbally this part of the transmission, please do return the universal plug, knowing the transmission will come to a close. Otherwise, the river is flowing. The river is flowing. The river is flowing. Be the river. be. You may be aware of that movement of resonance in the body or in the body analog if the direct sensation isn't accessible or expressing in that way right now. Lots of what I would describe as physical resonance. What I mean by that is some expression, outward expression of the inner encounter and relationship you have with the divine. For me, that shows up as buzzing and tingling and other expressions of resonance, primarily in my hands and feet, but also in other aspects of my body and in other ways as well. But whatever it is or isn't for you, just be with it fully. You're not making any mistakes. You can't get this wrong. It's all unfolding perfectly, no matter what is unfolding for you, including if you're experiencing absolutely nothing. I'll drop language again. There are lots of other words that I use to try to describe what I'm perceiving the circle is experiencing collectively. But for today, let's leave it at this: a deeper level of presence, which might also feel for some as though gravity got turned up and the body is heavier. That could be associated with something that is not resonant in other contexts. I would encourage you to open to that experience as a reflection of something deeply resonant, even if it's different, even if it's a little uncomfortable. Don't substitute your own meaning or experience for what I'm saying. That's not what I'm suggesting. Just that if you're feeling like gravity got turned up, you're not alone. Many people have reported that. And that experience is reflective of, let's just say, a deeper presence. And there can be other experiences as well. But rather than load up with ideas right now, I just want to acknowledge that shift that I'm beginning to experience. If you're someone who is an empath, and in whatever way you may have developed that or explored it, really encourage you just to stay with your own experience. That's all that matters. You'll find, I suspect, there's a freedom that comes with just allowing yourself to be with your own experience. Though it might be initially a little uncomfortable or even disorienting. Some other ideas I just want to reflect on here as you stay with your experience of whatever's unfolding. I'm not actually sending anything to you. There's not a transfer of anything from me to you. So even though you might be having an experience that's different than something you've had before, or maybe it's similar, but maybe stronger or more amplified, it's not, and I'm putting air quotes around this, my energy. It's the divine in you. And I use a couple of different words for divine. For me, they're all interchangeable and they don't have any external reference. There's no structure or definition that I'm trying to invoke. They're not shorthand for something else. Sometimes I use the word or the name God, but I'm not trying to invoke a religious reference. It's just another name for what I think of as the nameless one or the divine. And some may be coming to this experience without any resonance to the name divine or God or any of that. Be with your own name, even if it's emptiness or nothingness or universe or source. I don't mean even if, as if that's less. I mean, in whatever way you do or don't have a name for it, however that is for you, is perfect. Be with your own interior encounter and experience. And your language, if there is any for it, is perfect. Sometimes the mind can come in with, traditional or conventional cosmology, a cosmology of causality or the concerns or challenges that are foremost in your life or in your awareness right now. And if you can, I invite you to either be with the experience of what is coming up fully without trying to solve it, just feel the raw experience of it, or remind yourself with each breath, you are connected. Everyone, everything, the divine, the light, and the river is flowing. Some in the circle might be trying to hang on. The words are fading out, but what if I miss something? Let go entirely. Nothing I'm saying is the primary vector for what we are exploring. The words don't matter at all. What matters is the interior experience of what is unfolding, whatever it is for you. Beautiful. If you're concluding with this part of the transmission, I invite you to return the universal plug, knowing the transmission will come to a close. Otherwise, in just a moment, we'll continue on with the interactive portion, the Q&A for this, our first session in exploring divine resonance. I'm affirming the plug has been pulled and we have begun. If you're just tuning in for this final segment of our time together for today, there's an opportunity for us to explore with words, to ask a question, perhaps to reflect. And this opportunity is available exclusively for those that are directly participating in the class through the Zoom link, which is available to anyone and everyone who might like to join in the experience in next week's session. If you're on YouTube and you'd like to participate, just go to exploringdivineresonance.com and add your name and email address, and then you'll receive a login to my online learning platform, the Resonance Institute. It's entirely free. And with that, you'll get the Zoom links for next week's session. You'll also get an email with a study guide the day before, each Tuesday, the day before we meet, and as well as the ability to download the audio, the video, and the transcript from past sessions. So I'm open for a spontaneous Q&A. We can see if we can do that, if anyone has any questions coming up. If it gets too chaotic, maybe the way to do it is to start with a comment in the chat and then I can call on you. But until then, let's just pretend that it's going to work, because I think it will. And the way to do that is just to unmute yourself. You can just appoint yourself, I'm next. You don't have to have your camera on. We have a ton of people signed up, but a wonderfully modest number of people on the Zoom. So I think this can be very straightforward if you have something you want to explore and talk about. For those that are on YouTube, unfortunately, your comments and questions are not coming through to me. So I'll respond to them after we conclude the session, whether it's later today or over the next couple of days. And then I invite you to participate in the Zoom experience. With that, I'll be quiet. Transmission continues, integration, and so on. And you can just unmute yourself and say hi.
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 I was just wondering, how many people can you hold on Zoom?
How many people can I hold on Zoom?
Yeah.
Do you mean technically how many people can tune in simultaneously?
Yes.
500. How many people can participate? We could have tens of thousands of people if so many people wanted to participate. They would just have to participate on whatever that other thing's called, YouTube. But in terms of interacting, and it might, I mean, right now we have a very small percentage of the number of people have registered who are here. Maybe I scared everyone off. I don't know. But it's possible we might have to convert to a webinar, or maybe it can be orderly. But yeah, 500 people can participate on my Zoom line.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you explain more about the universal plug?
Sure. Happy to. So maybe I'll actually do a little sketch and try to draw a picture if that's okay. Kim, was that you asking the question?
Yes, it was me.
Oh, okay. So I'll talk to you and then you can unmute and interact with me if something isn't making sense. Is that okay?
Mhm.
You could be the surrogate question asker on
All
this.
right.
This is perhaps the most frequently asked question I've ever encountered in the last 13 or 14 years. And I even did a YouTube video on it, but then I promptly said I would link to it, and I've never taken the time to figure out which live stream it was answered in. So I'll just answer it here, and then we'll know it's in the first class of exploring divine resonance. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Can you see that screen share? Can you see that? Okay. So we probably don't need that. So one intuitive said to me, here's how I visualize the universal plug. It's like I'm in a shower, and there's a drain, and there's a shower head, and here I am in session, and there's the universal plug. Okay, here's how I see it. We have the body. We have all of these systems that operate in the body. We have ribbons or movement of energy that look like they're vertical, right? We have the traditional chakras and their various locations in the body, and so on. And for some reason, this showed up intuitively for me way back when. I saw this point that was not really part of any of that, that was sort of a gathering point within which, so if this is the low point, here's the drain, here's the plug and the drain down here. Oops, the arrow needs to be, there it is. But it doesn't really relate to a specific, I mean, I see it in a particular place, but everyone sees it in a different place. It doesn't really matter. But if you think of it this way, in separation, what I mean by that is in the illusion of separation, we're having an experience of being separate from ourselves and from each other. Let's say there's another person over here, and let's say God is up here, the sun in the sky. So there's a disconnect on one of these levels, and maybe on all three. So from that perspective, where we have some aspect of separation at play, the universal plug acknowledges that separation and opens a way for what appears to be outside of us and what appears to be inside of us to return to its state of resonance and alignment. So one perceptual view that I perceive in separation would be, I'm going to send those things that are not who I am out. But where are they going? Right? I mean, what is out there? What is other than? Now, to be clear, This is my ability to talk about it is probably still fairly limited, but much more informed, let's say today, than it was back in 2009 or whenever it was. It was about this time of year, 2009, when I received divine connecting breath intuitively. And I just saw that universal plug there. So I'll give you a couple of examples of, well, let me pause for a minute, Kim. How am I doing? Is any of this making sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here's another conversation I had with another client. We were at lunch. This is somebody who's lives in Colorado, and she happened to be in Fort Collins on this particular day and had said, "Can we grab lunch?" And I said, "What the heck? Let's grab lunch." This is a while ago. And I said, "Hey, somebody just wrote in one of the circles and said, why do I have to remove the universal plug?" And I said, "So what would you say to that person?" And she said, "Well, you don't go to the bathroom without taking off your pants." So I thought that was hilarious. Now, if that offends anyone, I apologize for offending you. But I thought it was absolutely hilarious because it was a great way of sort of saying lots without saying anything. But here's the thing. There is nothing outside of us, right? But we have an experience of that. So let's call the universal plug a way of acknowledging that and sort of formalizing the transition from we're in a guided meditation to now moving into transmission. Does that make sense?
It does. I have another question around it, though.
Sure.
So during transmission, am I receiving anything through the universal channel plug? Is it coming? Does it go both ways?
It's a great question. I mean, I would really encourage you to honor your experience of what is unfolding above and beyond anything that I would offer as how I perceive it. I think that ability to be with one's own experience is an essential part of the developmental journey and consciousness. I would say, in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no, right? If we're going to talk about what's actually real, there's no plug. There's nothing outside of your being and body. There's nothing being received in and so on. You'll notice that I don't use any visuals around drawing down divine light or anchoring to the earth or any of that. For me, those are reinforcements of separation and reinforcements of the illusion of separation rather than a process of piercing it. So divine connecting breath in my conscious awareness at this point is a way of supporting the transition from a perspective dominated in separation to a perspective dominated in wholeness. I'll also offer to you that there are people who are sitting in this circle who are in other circles with me who have, and this is a universal proclamation, by the way, going back to the beginning of my career, everyone eventually says this, or most people say this, and the comment is, "I can't stand divine connecting breath because it just feels like a bunch of noise to me." So it's a wonderful opening for someone who's new to this work, but it, rather than supporting a transition from separation into wholeness, it can draw somebody back into separation. And so depending on what unfolds in this circle, and it could happen within weeks even, we might get to a place where we do a little bit of breathing and I just say, for whatever remains in separation, I invite you to remove the universal plug. I'll do the same. With your permission, let's begin. Boom. But as for what is moving, if you're open to the visualization, and let me see if I can share the screen again. Sorry, it's keeping track of multiple Can you see the screen again,
Yeah.
the image? If you want to think of it this way, if there's an idea that's being enlivened, that's happening up here. If there's a feeling that's being enlivened, that's a heart, by the way, if it's not obvious, that's being enlivened from here. But if being is being enlivened, and here I'm going to get fancy because I can, that's happening like this. But notice, in all of these scenarios, at least in my representation of the universal plug, I'm putting it somewhere here. What does that have to do with any of this? Well, maybe nothing, right? I mean, and certainly from my perspective, there's nothing that's coming in. And in truth, there's nothing leaving either, even though we might have an experience of that, right? So you might have an experience of, I mean, let me say this. Some people, I think, have an experience when I say I can't even remember it. It's not a rote thing. I'm actually looking at the images of it when I'm saying it. But let me see if I can come to it. Something on the order of the light connecting in at the nostrils, right? And the artifacts of dissonance falling away. You may even, sometimes I'll say, you may even feel the wave of resonance moving throughout the body. Some people are feeling that, right? And they may actually be having an experience either of seeing themselves or within their own field of stuff dropping away to the universal drain here. Some people even will see words, as in story or aspects of their lives, leaving the drain. And that can be a really helpful process. I got to stop this so I can focus back on you here. But that could be a very helpful process in supporting some aspect of the developmental journey in consciousness, the ability to visualize and so on, or see these things and sort of understand them as they're happening. I want to suggest at some level that the idea that we have to understand something for it to work, or even that it needs to make sense, is at some point is a glass ceiling. It will hinder the mystical dimension, being able to integrate and be in the mystical dimension of life, whether it's in the body or the mind or in the outward expression of life. Does that make sense, Kim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay on track with questions. So if I'm not doing a good job answering your question, it wouldn't be a concern at all if you said, wait, that's not what I'm asking. So I would appreciate that, even because I don't want to wander off into things that don't matter to you. I want to be in service to you and whomever else might have questions.
So I'd like to ask a question about the divine connecting breath. This has come up for me like every time I join the circle, because you'll start off with take a breath, hold, and release to the count of 8. And then you talk about seeing a color. And somewhere along the line, I just get lost. I get lost, as in I'm just not there. But my question is, when you shift from taking the breath and holding and releasing to the count of 8 to seeing the color, is the idea that I still continue to take that breath and hold and release to the count of 8, or can I breathe normally after
You can just
that?
breathe however you want.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And actually, you're not alone, Susan, in the experience of dropping out at that point. I know there's at least one other person who's on the line right now who has exactly the same experience, and maybe many others. It's yeah. Let me say it a different way. There is no perfect way to do anything that we're doing. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. So if I resist something that someone is saying or a question or something, you might call me on it and say, what's your point? Why are you resisting? Which might be an interesting conversation. There might be a reason, or maybe it's my stuff. But the bottom line is, the most important experience is the one you're having from your perspective. And the less burden, or the least amount of burden you can carry with regard to obligation, ideally none, related to anything I'm saying, hallelujah.
I also had a question, well, not really a question, but the questions that you sent before this group, you kind of threw me, because first you're asking what's resonance, and then at the end you're asking about divine resonance, and I'm going, is there a difference?
I love it. I love it. That's great. Beautiful, beautiful reflection, Susan. It's how I perceive it. But see, when I'm asking a question, and I suspect there will be lots of questions in the weeks to come, I'm not asking them like, I have the answer. Will you come to my answer? That's not the point. I mean, I have a perspective on it, and I'm happy to share it if it's interesting, but probably I'd like to hear more about your perspective on it first, because it's many perspectives on whatever that paint a more complete picture, let's say. So I don't perceive a difference between divine resonance and resonance. How interesting that you don't either. But this is not intended to be a club of people who don't perceive the difference, and the people who don't agree with us, well, you're not part of the club. No, it's however it is for you. Do you perceive? Is there a difference? It's a simple question for you. No.
Thank you.
Thank you. One question that came up earlier for me, and I'd love, for those of you that have a camera on, if you can, I don't know, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on how you feel about this. I wondered if it would be helpful to receive an email a couple hours before the start of this circle. I know you get one on Tuesday, and I don't know, it just came up for me. It doesn't matter to me, right? If that's great, then if you want that, give me a thumbs up. If you don't want to, give me a thumbs down. And if no one has anything to say about it, I'll leave it the way it is. It doesn't matter to me. It's very easy to program such a reminder in if it's meaningful. No one's saying anything. Oh, a thumbs up. Okay. Okay, great. We have one thumb up. So
Where's the thumb?
the thumb is with Tasnim. Are you skeptical of such a thumb? You don't like this idea, Susan? Is that why you're asking?
No. You're saying give a thumbs up. I don't know how to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
I just meant visually. Kim gave one too. Kim knows how to do this really fancy thing, which I still don't understand how to do, even though I've been doing a virtual retreat for the last year every other week. And Gary told me how to do this. Let me see.
Click on reaction.
There's a thing called reactions. Yeah. Yes. Under reactions down below, you can give a thumbs up. But anyway, I don't want to.
Sure.
There you go. So there's another. I don't know how. Does it just go away on its own? I don't know. Anyway, so maybe I'll do that. I'll try that, and then I can get feedback next week about it. There are many more people who are registered for the circle, but of course, whether people are available on any given Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern and so on, who knows? Doesn't matter, right? People show up that show up. It's all good. Watch the replay, do whatever you like. It's no big deal. Okay. I've got a few more minutes. I'm happy to answer any other questions. If anything, and Clint is saying thumbs up to that. Okay, great.
So Ken, just to clarify,
Sure. Hi, Brian.
The other, how you doing? Well, two questions actually, but the first one is just to clarify. So you, during the transmission, you're saying, the words don't matter, which is good. We just kind of focus on the experience. And from based on what the last two questions were, or last input you had, was that, is this the same for like the guided, does that hold true for like the guided meditation or whatever that's going into that? Because you're right, I sort of drop out after you start talking about the when you start getting into the color of the breath and stuff. But I find if I try to keep my mind engaged with what you're saying, then that just keeps my mind active.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
harder to maintain that drop out.
Yeah. Drop. I'll try to remember to say that next week. If I didn't say it today, my apologies. Drop me as quickly as you can.
Okay.
It's not about me. It's not about my words. It's not, I mean, it really, what it has to do with, from my standpoint, is the guidance I'm getting and so on. Right. But there's sort of this, if I can use this word, as a circle, we're embodying and integrating. We're having an entrainment experience with the divine. The faster we come to a place of resonance as a circle, the less talking I'm going to do. Because I actually would prefer not to talk, believe it or not. I mean, I enjoy communicating with words, but ultimately, I think we can do much more together if I don't say anything. The work we can do is infinite. If I talk, it's necessarily limited.
Right. That's always, like I said, the problem I've always had with what guided meditations and stuff is well, maybe not the whole point, but to try to quiet your mind, calm your system down, stuff like that. For these other meditations I'm talking about, they want you to do like this. Like I remember one where they want you to focus on your breath and imagine, inflating a balloon in your gut and imagine the breath going over your upper lip. And I'm saying, you got me concentrating on 50 different, how am I supposed to quiet my mind? Because I have to actively make my mind go to those. So that's, like I said, that's always a problem I've had with those, where if I can just kind of, it's smoother if I can just kind of just listen, but not, I guess, listen. That makes sense.
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And I think we'll be there very quickly as a circle. And I mean, it's possible that was going on during the YouTube live streams over the last year, but I'm much more comfortable in this context and creating this sort of no structure creates a lot of freedom. And in that space, we'll be in silence and you'll be able to do whatever you want to do and you won't have to worry about actively ignoring me.
So that other leads me to my other question. I'm assuming you never really, not to my knowledge, really come out and said it, but I've been kind of watching your the YouTube, the lives that you've been doing on Wednesday. So I'm assuming that this course is sort of replacing that, since it overlaps the time that you never really came out and said one way or the other. I just sort of assumed, since it was an hour before, maybe we're just going to go from that into the next or whatever. But I just kind of.
Yeah, that again, that's my my failure of communicating. I think this is another value of actually having an open line rather than reading people's comments. I learned so much, and I think, this is so obvious to me, but I've never said it out loud. I mean, this is so obvious it should have been obvious to me. Yes, in a sense, it is replacing the weekly lives on YouTube. But I also think what will happen is, in this circle, we'll pick up, maybe there'll be a bonus transmission or bonus Q&A that will just be held over on YouTube and not on Zoom simulcast on YouTube. But it won't be on Wednesday. It'll be maybe another day of the week or something. So
like I said, sort of, but like I said, since you're doing this like an hour before the trans, I wasn't sure if like you were going to do this for an hour and then go back over to YouTube. See, it wasn't quite that obvious, but since you didn't say it and we've gone over into that time, I'm like, well, that's probably how it's going to go. But, you know, just, and it may be for other people out there wondering or whatever that, you know, why your things on Wednesday just suddenly stopped. Because I wouldn't always get the emails every week. And sometimes, you know, sometimes I would get them and would go live, and sometimes nothing would happen. So I'd assume nothing was going on. So,
So one of the things that is happening is that when we started the hour earlier, and many of the lives happened at this time at 5 p.m. I mean, it's not now 5 p.m., but when we started, it was 5 p.m. Eastern. I did lives at 5 p.m. Eastern. And then I got to a place where I was like, if I'm going to do a live, I'd rather stack it closer to the end of my day and wrap my day up with the live. But this circle is simulcast live on YouTube. So right now, you and I, our conversation is broadcasting out on my YouTube channel, and there may be people who tuned in at the top of the hour expecting live and instead got this Q&A. So I think people will sort of naturally get to it, but also to your point, I could have made the announcement, and I will. That's a great point.
I just, like I said, it's an observation I made, and it's always good to get.
It's very helpful. It's wonderfully helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Glad you're here. Anything else coming up to explore? I'll take that as a no. Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, good. Very good. So if you are on YouTube right now, to Brian's point, that what has replaced the live, which was happening starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, is now 5 p.m. Eastern. You're seeing the conclusion now, not quite the end formally, but we're in the last little bit. And I'm happy to go a little bit longer too. But if you're over there wondering, how do I get onto that Zoom call so I can ask a question? And because I can't, hang on a second, got to get a drink of water. Because I'm using Zoom for this, I can no longer publish the event ahead of time. And I failed to figure out how to change my default description of the live. So I don't know what the description of this live is. But presumably over the next week, I'll be able to change the default description, and in it will be the link to go register for this class, which is free. You just put your name and email address in. And when you do that, you'll get an email every Tuesday. And I'm going to try sending that email out as well a couple hours before the start of the live. So at 1 p.m. Eastern, excuse me, at 3 p.m. Eastern, it's 1 p.m. Mountain. Sometimes I don't translate time very well. I'm in the Mountain time zone. At 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll send that out with a reminder, and it will link back into my online learning platform, the Resonance Institute, which is where all the Zoom links are posted. And then also in that online learning platform will be a replay of each segment. So the opening and the teaching segment, which today was also included the transmission, those will all be one in this first class, but presumably in the future, those will be split. Intro, teaching in one, transmission in another, Q&A in a third. You can download the audio recording, you can download the video recording or watch and stream them online. And you'll also be able to download the rough translation or transcription that comes out of Zoom automatically. I have an enterprise level account that transcribes everything automatically. I'm not going to spend the time to clean it up. I'll just print it as a PDF and post it. Hopefully that will be meaningful in whatever way you might want to use that. So to everyone who's on YouTube right now watching the live stream, if you want to be in the circle here that is asking questions the way that Susan and Kim and Brian and others have, it's easy, it's free. Just add your name and email address and you can go to exploringdivineresonance.com. Don't type www in at the beginning. Just type out exploringdivineresonance.com and boop, it'll send you into the page, and you can go. And Clint is raising his hand. How exciting, Clint. I actually saw it. Excellent, man. Unmute yourself if you would, and share away. What's coming up?
All right. I'm going back to the universal plug question.
Okay.
What's the significance of replacing the universal plug?
Yeah, so there's some experiential learning that I went through early on. When I say early on in my career, I mean during the time when I was primarily working with people who had physical challenges. So that was at least for the first 2 or 3 years. And I actually worked with a number of people who were dealing with cancer. And so it came up intuitively to do so. And I can reflect further on this, but from a practical standpoint, there was one client in particular who had pancreatic cancer. And she got to the point where she wanted to stop her medical treatments, but she wanted to continue working with me. And so she was clear that she was going to be transitioning out of the body, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. And we did a session on this particular day, and she called me up or texted me maybe an hour or two after the session and said, I'm like, my body's whacking out here. I'm really struggling. And I got on the phone with her immediately. And I mean, she was in sort of bad shape physically. She was really struggling, which would not have been her normal response to being in session together. And I looked around for 2 seconds and I went, oh, the universal plug isn't in. So boop, let's go ahead and return that thing energetically. And like within seconds, she was like, oh my God, I feel so much better. Now, I can sit here and spin out a narrative for why that's the case. But I think the most authentic thing I can say about it is it falls under the framework of divine mystery. And I mean, if it's helpful, I can speculate about what's going on there. But it seems to me that there's a movement into a deeper experience of wholeness that is, for some, let's say, an expanded experience. But because until we are integrated and embodied, or embodied and integrated, depending on how that unfolds, that experience is being supported, let's say, or enlivened. That's an important context to be honored. But that's the best I got for you, Clint.
All right. I think I get it.
Okay. To Brian's question earlier, I did lives at 3, and then the live stream felt like it should be a little bit shorter. But anytime I teach, I mean, I can say it's a 60-minute class, but they're never 60-minute classes because there's always something else that happens, a conversation and so on. And I really like to be buttoned up with transmissions and so on by 5 p.m. Mountain. So that's another reason to start at 5 p.m. Eastern. So there's a window for us to have our experience and for me to be able to make a transition into the evening, which allows me to eventually go to sleep easily. If I am in transmission into the evening, it disrupts my sleep. So sleep being an aspect of my self-care that I value. So anyway, anything else coming up?
I'll just comment, so you'll mess with our sleep schedule.
Say more, Susan. There's a lot I can say about this. You know, on retreat, for years, people would say, "You had us up last night working. You were working with us," and I'd say, "Yeah, I guess that's true." And then on one retreat, I admitted that although I was working with the group, I was not conscious when I was doing that. I did not wake up. To which some clever person in the group said, "If you're going to get me up, I'm getting you up." And that night I woke up in the middle of the night and I was awake for the whole thing. Turnabout's fair play. What can I say? It's hard with, you know, with people in different time zones and so on. I recognize that some people are staying up very late to be part of classes and so on live. And I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard thing to balance, right? You just have to do what's right for you and hope that other people will work and people can tune in through the replay and so on. And since some people think they're going to sleep in transmission, they actually, I'm the sleep aid. They listen to transmission as a way of going to sleep. Although I've encouraged people not to do that per se, because there's a lot more going on than going to sleep. So that may not be the best way to transition off into dream time, but okay. You'll figure that out for yourself if it's true. Let's see if there's anything else coming in, and then we can, if not, we'll wrap up here in just a couple of minutes. I don't want to talk over. If somebody has anything, you just unmute and start talking and I'll stop. One of the things that I hope is available to each person in the circle is an opportunity to open to the depth of divine resonance of your own doing, right? That's ultimately, from my perspective, that would be one of the goals of anything that I do or teach or facilitate. I mean, there are people with whom I've worked for more than 10 years now on a consistent basis, spiritual messengers and so on. But always what's happening in that session, it's not like we're trying to restore anything. There's just a constant expansion. But as that experience expands of, let's say, wholeness or the divine or the mystical dimension, whatever you want to call it, it integrates into every part of their life. And so my hope is, or let me say, the thing that I feel inspired around the questions in the study guide is an invitation to that interior exploration that is available within each of us as a way of opening to points of conscious awareness that then are anchored and deepened, perhaps as we come together in circle, but also in your own exploration and meditation and so on. As much as I love being part of your life and am grateful for the opportunity to be included in it, my wish would be that if you continue to include me in your life, it's not as a crutch, but as a support for the expanding experience that is opening up and flooding into every part of your life anyway. And also because it's fun to journey together, but not because there's no other way to get to it. In other words, I think what is opening up within us when we sit together is what's already there. So hope that makes sense. Let's see if there's anything else. I always forget about the chat, but I don't think there's anything going on in the chat. The chat is empty. So exciting, an empty chat. Okay, let's take a deep breath in and hold. And as you begin releasing this breath now, just let go of the idea that there's anything to understand and that anything we've talked about has any real meaning beyond whatever got stirred up or comforted within you when we talked about it. But then you can even let that go and just open up to that interior, blank, empty space where the divine floods in to every part of you. And when you're ready, I invite you to begin returning the universal plug. I'll do the same as I begin bringing this transmission to a close. Transmission to a close now. Plug all the way in until we're together again very soon. Thank you for making yourself part of this circle. Peace.